Now, the central point I want to make here is actually not about January 6th at all. But before we get to that point, I do have to review, I feel like I must review a few of the cringiest episodes yesterday during the left's January 6th festivities. It was destined already to be the most insufferable day in American history, and I think it certainly lived up to that billing. So kicking off right away with Camila Harris delivering a somber address in remembrance of that day, while drawing direct comparisons between a bunch of dummies trespassing in the Capitol and Pearl Harbor. Listen.
Fellow Americans, good morning. Certain dates echo throughout history, including dates that instantly remind all who have lived through them where they were and what they were doing when our democracy came under assault. Dates that occupy not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941, September 11th, 2001, and January 6th, 2021.
Well, there you go. Pearl Harbor, 9/11. I mean, I'd say that almost basically exhausts the list of bad things in history that the average leftist is aware of. There is one other she didn't mention, though, and that is the Holocaust. But surely nobody would ever be so egregious, so utterly without shame, as to actually compare January 6th to the Holocaust. Surely nobody would do that, you might insist. And you would be wrong.
Dwight Eisenhower during World War II made sure all the Holocaust camps were filmed. So we've got the film footage. So now we're combating conspiracy theorists, deniers, and some, trumpeteers. But my worry is, what do we call this and make sure we honor this day, this dark stained day every year? So we've got to keep saying January 6th. I think it is like December 7th, Pearl Harbor, and it is like the 9/11 tragedy. And we also need to not be afraid to call it the Trump insurrection of January 6th, because in the end, all roads to what went wrong that day lead to Donald Trump's ill behavior, his anti-democratic stance he took, the big lie after the presidential election tallies came in and Joe Biden had won by millions of votes.
Well, now that we have that base covered with all of the overwrought historical analogies, what we need next are, of course, the inspirational musical performances. Unfortunately, Lin-Manuel Miranda and the cast of Hamilton, they were on hand. Well, they were on Zoom anyway. Not wearing masks, which I thought was very reckless. And they were there to serenade members of Congress with a rendition of whatever the hell this song is.
When you smile, I fall apart, and I thought I was so smart. My father wasn't around. I swear that I'll be around for you. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll make a million mistakes. I'll make the world safe and sound for you. We'll come of age with our young nation. We'll bleed and fight for you. We'll make it right for you. If we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you.
And that was followed, of course, finally by the requisite candlelight vigil and the somber, and this time masked, performance of God Bless America.
God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
By the way, if you're wondering what using the Lord's name in vain looks like or sounds like, it's that. That's what it sounds like. It doesn't actually mean using the Lord's name in vain. That doesn't actually mean using a phrase like damn. In fact, God does damn things, and there's nothing wrong necessarily with pointing that out. If I were to say that I'm tired of damned gender theory being taught in schools, which I am, and it is, that's not taking the Lord's name in vain because gender theory is a damned and damnable thing. But there we have people singing the name of God in an empty and manipulative way, purely for theatrics, to score political points. That's what taking his name in vain sounds like, okay? But I digress. There is, I think, one fundamental point that needs to be made about all of this. And here it is. January 6, 2021 was a time when a group of useful idiots did something very stupid, something that had zero chance of producing any positive result whatsoever, positive for them anyway. There was nothing positive that could possibly come out of it for them personally, politically, anything. And in doing that, those useful idiots provided ammunition to the left, which the left will never stop using, ever. In fact, as annoying as all of this pageantry is, it's almost pointless to complain about it. Because of course the left is going to do this. Sure, the whole routine is cynical and absurd, but what else do you expect them to do? A bunch of right-wing dummies rioted at the Capitol. Do we expect the left to say, hey, you know what? Let's not make a big deal out of this. Let's just move on, guys. Is that what we expect them to do? No, only Republicans are stupid enough to refuse a gift when their enemies hand it to them. Democrats are going to make hay. That's what they do. If you give them lemons, they make lemonade. If you give them lemonade to begin with, then they'll just say thank you and they'll sip from it gratefully and repeatedly forever. It might not be honest or right morally, but it's smart politics. And that's what they're doing with January 6th. That's why when I look at what's happened and how the narrative has formed, and I look at, what happened yesterday, I'm not nearly as angry at the Democrats as I am at the Republicans. Democrats, again, are using the ammunition that they've been given. The hapless Republicans will whine about it, but rather than whining, they should be doing the exact same thing with the BLM riots. All of the time that the Democrats spend talking about January 6th, Republicans should be spending the exact same amount of time talking about the BLM riots. And in that case, it would not be dishonest or cynical because unlike January 6th, the BLM riots of 2020 were in fact an assault on our way of life, our civilization, our democracy, if you like. They were deadly. They were actually deadly. They were catastrophic. They were unthinkably tragic. And they were supported every step of the way by every elected Democrat in the country. Explicitly supported. The BLM riots resulted in 25 deaths, dozens of injuries, $2 billion of damage across the country. They sparked a crime surge that still hasn't died away. They were several orders of magnitude worse than January 6th, worse in every way by every conceivable metric. Okay? They had exactly the destabilizing effect on our system that January 6th allegedly had, but didn't really have. It's not a coincidence that crime is running rampant in many of the cities where these riots occurred. The criminals learned that they could get away with this kind of thing. They could get away with violence, arson, looting, and so on. And they've taken that message to heart. The BLM riots, therefore, have a lasting impact and a relevance that January 6th does not have. It's not like there are going to be more riots at the Capitol. Nobody is ever rioting at the Capitol ever again. Okay, that much is guaranteed. The people who took part in that are paying dearly for it. Paying much more dearly than they should, actually, according to how the law is written. They're being overcharged. But the BLM rioters have paid almost no price at all. So they've learned the exact opposite lesson. This is why the BLM riots represent an ongoing existential threat in a way that January 6th does not and never did and never could and never will. And while most people on the right condemned January 6th while it was happening, I mean, almost everybody did. Except for the people that were there in the building. Everybody else said, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, obviously, you shouldn't be rioting at the Capitol. But that hasn't happened on the left. On the left, most people supported BLM and still do to this day without apology. See, this is not whataboutism, just to be clear. Bringing up BLM is not whataboutism. Bringing up January 6th is whataboutism. Because that is the irrelevant thing used to distract from the more important thing. And this is a point that Republicans could make. And they could keep making. Over and over again. They could have candlelight vigils for the officers killed or injured by BLM. They could have days of remembrance. They could have memorial services. They could give speeches. They could make sure that nobody ever forgets the date when retired police captain David Dorn was shot in cold blood by a BLM militant during a riot. Or the date when BLM militants invaded a police station in Minneapolis and burned it to the ground while the officers ran for their lives. Republicans could do that, but they don't. I mean, they could talk about it incessantly, constantly, so that nobody ever forgets. And that each Democrat responsible for encouraging it is held responsible, branded with it, has to wear it around their necks for life. They could do that, but they don't. Because they are feckless, hapless, incompetent, and scared. What else is new?
Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.